Welcome to Blue Lizard Farm. Farming is hard. It's stressful. It's usually heavily debt laden. And so there's a lot of pressure on the farmers. It's really important that we work hard on our mental health. Farming has the highest suicide rate in the nation. And even though I'm here trying to encourage people to farm, you need to be aware of that. But it's manageable. And if you make the right choices in the beginning, then you can create an environment that you will love. I was at a conference and there was organizations there that were concerned about farmers' mental health. So it's important that we take the time to seek out those organizations if you're having problems and get the help that you need. It's available. Use it.
So, beginning farmers, guys, when somebody wants to start a farm, what are the things that you would suggest that they work on emotionally as they go through the process? Find farmers become, especially new farmers, are so passionate about what they're doing, and so was I. And so that's where I got that, where I didn't separate myself from the farm. So what would you suggest in the beginning to help keep farmers keep a healthy perspective and a healthy relationship with their farm, so that they don't become emotionally overwhelmed when things don't go, when crop failures occur, when employees, when there's problems with employees and keeping crops harvested. I mean, the whole thing. What would you suggest? And because we could just take turns.
I'm Julie Jesper. I'm the program coordinator for the Western Region Agricultural Stress Assistance Program. And one of the things that we talk about, and I mentioned it earlier, is that agrarian imperative. And this is from a research from Dr. Michael Rossman. And he says, and he was doing the research during the 1980s farm crisis. And he said that the connection to the land is so deep within farmers and people who are attracted to farming. And so when your connection with your land becomes that central focus, it's hard to separate your emotions and your mental state from the land itself. You add to that the burden of saying, I'm going to provide food for the whole world, or even just my community. That's another additional burden. So understanding that your character is impacted is a major impact, but it's also a positive benefit. That agrarian imperative is very admirable, but also can lead to additional stress, and it can also lead to it taking other risks. And so those additional risks add another level of difficulty in adjusting. So one of the things that I often have suggest is the ability to not socially isolate. Keeping yourself, the ability to discuss with other farmers, to live within, or not necessarily live in community, but take advantage of your community connections. Farmers, especially in rural areas, tend to be really isolated. And so it's really hard to drive a long way to be connected with your community. So finding ways to do that is one of the things that we suggest.
My name is Lindsay Chichester. I'm an extension educator in Douglas County, so northern Nevada. And I grew up on a cattle and sheep ranch. And so I'm the fourth generation. So I totally get the struggles of, in our family, there's a lot of succession and potential, generational pressure to pass it on to the family, make it better, keep it better for the next generations. So I would just always recommend to newly beginning farmers and ranchers to budget in time for vacations, time for family. Write down your plan. So when I work with youth producers, we always encourage them, all right, if you're out of town or you're playing sports and someone has to come and care for your animals, write down what they need to know to feed them, check their water, do whatever needs to be done. And I think for adults, that's similar. So whether you have employees or neighbors, they can come over and be like, okay, hey, they're out of town on vacation this week. I know that I need to, feed this one this and do all these things. And then you have some peace of mind knowing that you've left thorough and accurate instructions on how to care for whatever you might have left those directions for. So, don't sacrifice family. Again, if youth have sports events or, I don't know, school events, you just have to take the time to focus on family material.
I'm Brenda Freeman, and I'm a professor of counseling and a mental health specialist for Extension at the University of Nevada, Reno.
Thank you.
So, but I want to thank you for asking the question, because you're looking at through a prevention lens, saying, what can we do upstream so that this doesn't happen down here to farmers and ranchers, where we have the high suicide rates and we have all sorts of mental health issues and depression and anxiety and such. So catching that up front seems to me, especially with the young and the new farmers and ranchers, seems to be exactly the way to go. I think that my first go-to thought would be that we need to change the way we think about work in many of our occupations in America, in farming and ranching, but as well. But in the broader culture, there's a press to think that work is more important than family, and that work is more important than your vacation time. Work is more important in terms of how it impacts your cognition and your psychological well-being, that you should be focusing on work all the time. And the smartphones, etc. We're getting texts over the weekends, and farmers and ranchers are already living in a condition where there's a boundarylessness between work and home often. So they're already dealing with that problem where work is infringing on weekends. So I think one of the things is understanding that work is not the same as life. It's not. Work is critical, and the farm and ranch, those are important, but they're not who we are as humans. They're not who we are. So having some sense of identity that is associated with things other than just what I do for a living, because then if you think about a disastrous situation where you could no longer do that, then what identity do you have? So I think a good place to start is thinking about how you identify with work and other identities that you have. But I also think that, learning boundary setting skills, learning upfront how to utilize relaxation techniques, meditation, yoga, stress management, understanding stress management, that there's skill sets that will help one to be able to define other kinds of boundaries around work that are important. But also there's help out there. And I think that help-seeking skills and the stigma around help-seeking are problematic in the agricultural community, because there's help from Farm Bureau and there's help from Extension, and seems to be a good willingness to accept those kinds of resources and co-ops and other kinds of assistance. But there's also mental health assistance it can be telehealth counseling or face-to-face counseling, but there are other kinds of workshops and self-help experiences and online courses that one can take that help us to understand mental health better, and to prize that mental health is an important part of being able to be good in ag. Because I would argue that a farmer or rancher who's struggling with mental health is going to be impaired on the job because they're depressed and they're worrying about these other kinds of mental health issues. And so having strong mental health in a way is a prerequisite, in my point of view, to being successful in the occupation.
Yeah, through my therapy, as I learned to separate myself and my identity, just like you're describing, from the farm, I'm a much better farmer now, right? Because my failure of the farm is not necessarily my failure, because the farmers are working as hard as they can to do the best they can. And that was one of the skills I think that my therapist taught me, is you can only do the best you can. And the stress, I loved your pile and your description in the course about this gold pile that you expel when you have all these stresses. And I that really resonated with me historically, because this burnt a lot of my goals on just thinking that for some reason that if I am not stressed and engulfed in this it's not going to be successful. And I found that the opposite is true, that as I separated myself, it opened my mind up. I was able to think better and manage the farm much better, and not be afraid of, well, if the employees don't work out, if the weather doesn't work out, or the insects kill the crop, it's not the end of the world. It's just because of the type of farming I do with small vegetables, it's just that crop. And it's not the end of the world.
We're under a lot of stress and strain financially, physically, and emotionally. If you think you're having problems with depression and suicidality, please seek help. If you like the content here, please subscribe. If you have questions, comment down below.